think it takes time and testing and trying new things. I thought I wanted to be a college coach. That didn't work. I thought I wanted to do overall player development. That didn't work. I thought I wanted to, just be a shooting coach. And in a way, I'm still doing that. But, it wasn't quite it, right?
You are listening to the Bridging Impact Podcast, transforming leaders on and off the court with host, Coach Furtado. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. I am excited today because we have shooting coach and mentor, founder of Shooters Shoot, always on the road, hard to nail down, but we got the time today, so I'm really excited to have BriAnna Garza join us on the show today. So welcome, BriAnna.
Yeah, thank you. It's just so you know, it's BriAnna, like banana, but that's a common misconception. It's been great. Today is day 532 on the road for me, just building the business, following the path. So it's I'm glad we finally got to get connected.
Absolutely. Well, 532 on the path. And BriAnna, my apologies. Let's dive right in. The first question we always ask before I get to, kind of the journey and what it's been like on the road, how has basketball made an impact on your life and what made you want to go on this journey?
Yeah, I think basketball, I'm finding, is just a universe ever expanding. Who knew that this was a niche to begin with, and that this niche would lead to all of the other niches inside of it in shooting? And I think, obviously, as a player, basketball was the first opportunity anybody ever gave me, or the first opportunity I got to lead anything. And I've always really felt that was a personal legend of mine, is to lead something bigger than me. And so basketball gave me my first shot at doing that. And getting into coaching after playing, I tried the college coaching thing. Wasn't enough joy in the gym for me, to be honest with you, and pivoted into development. And now we're here.
Pivoted into development. So you're talking about, I think, leading yourself and kind of finding yourself. When it comes to that, when did you recognize, and was it when you were a player or as a coach, that, basketball is giving you this opportunity to kind of lead?
It's funny. In my adult life, nobody ever really let me lead anything. In basketball, they did. When I was young, high school, college, I was always the point guard, and I had that opportunity there, and I loved that. But once I became an adult, nobody, and I guess I was young, so at the beginning of all of these things, so I guess that sort of makes sense. But even within my roles, as a bar, I bartended at Chili's for 7 years, and they never let me train any other bartenders, right? So little things like that, it was like, man, I just wish somebody would have given me the chance. And so as it goes, Shooters Shoot came along, and it was sort of a way where it's like, if somebody doesn't give you the platform, you give it to yourself.
Right. And so how has that, kind of experience for yourself kind of influenced your programming and how you teach and lead and coach? And, it's more than shooting, right? We both know that. It's about leading oneself and helping people figure out who they are. So how has that experience helped influence your coaching?
Yeah, I think everybody just wants to be believed in. I think shooting is freaking hard. And when you can teach somebody to go through something hard and go through slumps and keep it moving and let it be hard, and just trust that you're going to come out on the other side despite not having evidence in front of you, which is essentially what all of us who experience success have had to do. We've had to scrape quarters off of our, floorboards in order to get laundry done. Teaching that through the medium of shooting, the audacity of self-belief. I don't have any evidence in front of me yet, but I have the audacity to believe I'm going to still get this thing done.
How do we develop that? How do we tap into that audacity of self-belief? Because that is the challenge, right? In getting some certain athletes, right, to develop and, almost develop a mindset of I am a shooter, right? Before, maybe even mastering some of the technicalities of it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just on an interview with another podcast, the Play by Play podcast. But he asked me the same question, and yeah, I think I'll give the same answer. Have you ever heard of the Pygmalion effect? The Pygmalion effect. So my background is in psychology, and it was one of the studies that I always really remembered was, back in the 80s, psychologists could just do whatever. There wasn't any parameters on, like, I wonder what this experiment will do to somebody long term. Like, do you remember the Stanford prison experiment? Yeah, like they were just like, hey, let's try it and just see what see what happens. And so this was one of those experiments where they went to an elementary school, these researchers, and they asked the administrators, hey, can we give all of your elementary students this test? And I think we're going to find and identify the bloomers, is what they labeled them at your school. And we just want to see if we're right. And so the administrators were like, yeah, do whatever. And so they had all of these students take this test. They got the test back, they threw them in the trash can, and they just arbitrarily, randomly picked 7 students in each class to label them as bloomers. And they told the teachers of them, they said, okay, these are your 7 bloomers, just so you know. And they didn't really tell them anything else. At the end of the school year, every single one of those students that they labeled as bloomers were doing better across the board: math, science, reading, social skills, whatever. And all of this came back to the teachers simply believing that these students were labeled as bloomers, that these were the students that were supposed to, by this arbitrary test, be successful. And so that Pygmalion effect, like that one study, among all of the other things you learn in psychology about, instilling belief and how important that is and all of that, like that one study sticks out to me is like, okay, this is science talking about a cheat code. Like, you want a kid to be successful, then you just simply have to make them believe that you believe that. And in turn, you also have to believe that to be true. I was at a conference last weekend, and a coach asked during a presentation, hey, what if we don't have any green light shooters? Because this one position was like, this is for your green light shooter, this is what you do. And the coach said, well, what if I don't have any green light shooters? I'm like, well, if you don't believe you have any green light shooters, then you never will. Then you start there. Like, you have to believe that they can become a green light shooter, or you won't have any. Yeah, and so that's kind of the foundation of all the way that I train. Is I prioritize that, because everybody wants somebody in their corner, and that's how you build audacity into somebody. Is they have to believe somebody that they look up to and that they respect has the audacity to believe in them too. I think that's where it starts.
That is a great place to begin. And I have heard the saying of, and I'm sure you have as well, like, leadership is the transfer of belief. And what is that, like, belief in that, like, kind of relaying, into their potential? What does it sound like? What does it look like? I guess what is the feeling of it?
Yeah, I think hype people get paid. I think not being too cool to hype up your kid whenever they reach this thing that they've really been trying to go after, and like make a scene out of it. Something we do intentionally is we'll see the behavior that we like, or we see somebody make a mistake and then redo it again, and we'll stop the whole gym and we'll be like, yo, Johnny, I saw you mess that thing up 2 or 3 times, and you still kept going, and you bring attention to it, because that's really what it is. It's less on, can you do this sick move and step back, side step, whatever, but can you not do it over and over and over again and still continue to try to do it? And so we even highlight those behaviors of, like, did y'all see what little Johnny just did? He just kept going, and when he didn't have to, he could have let that thing defeat him. And so behaviors that get celebrated get repeated, and we hype people up constantly. And we give that feeling of being hyped by somebody that you look up to, by somebody who looks like you or doesn't look like you, or you're somebody that is your leader, because many of us were not coached like that. Yeah. And so I think part of my own, audacity, if you will, I think I just got lucky. I think how some people have, they're naturally inclined to singing, or they're naturally inclined to be athletic, or they're naturally inclined to have like a math brain. I think just by dumb luck, I was naturally inclined to be motivated by doubt, or by somebody thinking I can't do something, or, things that when things go wrong, I've never had, I don't know where that came from. Likely from my parents not letting me quit anything. But I think adversity has never really been something that I've struggled with, that has taken confidence away from me. And I wish I had a better answer for, like, I really think I just got lucky in the way my brain was wired. And so I think I find it to be my role to teach that, to teach the way that my brain accidentally got wired to think, because I think it is something that can be learned, just like singing, or being good at basketball can be learned. It just takes some people longer. Some people are naturally inclined to it, and I was lucky to have the latter.
And that makes a lot of sense too, because to be a great shooter, right, you have to have that resilience mindset because you
Mm.
miss so many shots as a shooter. And so I'm just curious, I'm thinking about, certain athletes as I'm hearing you talk, like in passing on that belief. And when you're working with different athletes, like in, different scenarios, how do you help them get through, the quote unquote shooter slump? And I think shooting is honestly probably one of the most mental parts of the game of basketball. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the most mental out of any sport, but just because of its nature of the ebb and flow. And, you may be shooting some shots in rhythm, like there could be different reasons and nuances. And it's just like so much going on up there. Like, how do you teach that resilience after, a couple of bad shooting games?
Yeah, I think I put a huge foundation on making sure to communicate that your worth is not equal to your wins, and doubling down on that. That plus something I used to say to myself, and used to say when I was coaching teams, is law of averages. Like, all right, you've missed the last 7 shots. Next one's bound to go in. Law of averages, right? And then always rewarding and saying, like, I love that miss is something I'll say too. Like, I love that miss, right? Like, I want you to take that shot 10 times out of 10. I want you to shoot that. I know it sucks to miss, and just leveling with them. Like, I know it sucks objectively to miss shots. Nobody wants to miss shots. It sucks to fail, but keep it moving. Like, keep shooting. You have the green light from me. You have the green light from your teammates. And another reframe that I provide is, a lot of those athletes that, they miss the first few shots, the next thing they do is they hesitate, right, when they catch the ball. And we all used to do that. We've all been through that. And what those athletes are thinking in those moments are usually unselfish. Like, I don't want to shoot this again because I've missed the last few. Let me give somebody else an opportunity. When really, the reframe that I stumbled upon, was in that moment when you catch the ball, despite having missed before. When you catch the ball and you are open, there's this split second you have where your post players know that you're open, so you usually shoot it, so they get to position themselves that your crashers on the outside can come in and crash. So if you decide then to not to shoot, if you hesitate in that moment because of whatever's happened before, like, that is actually the selfish decision that you're making, because you're making that entire moment about you, and you're not wanting to fail, and you're not having a willingness to just stare fear in the face and have a conversation with it rather than letting it dictate what you do. And so that's another reframe that I make for my athletes, especially, at these shooting camps that I run, is like, I get it. You don't want to miss. Cool. Nobody wants to miss. Can you continue to shoot anyway? Because otherwise, you're just making this whole thing about you.
That's an interesting reframe. I think when you're thinking about it, you're gonna catch and shoot. You're like, originally when you're thinking, you're like, I don't want to let my teammates down, right? But that's like, it's your role to let it fly,
Yeah.
and so it's your role in the offense, and that's the flow, right? You're talking about the different crashers, and so people are playing off of you and expect you to shoot. Oh, he or she has 3 or 4 feet of space. They're gonna knock it down, right? And so recognizing that is, in an important spot. And I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. And I think that's kind of the art of coaching, is helping players kind of like reframe
Yeah.
and think of things in different ways.
Right. Get out of their own way. And then, especially young athletes, like they want to be unselfish. Most of them, anyway, they want to be the person that's the right person for the team. And so all of that's coming from a great place, right? From the same place. And it's, when you kind of give them the freedom to understand, like, oh, it's okay that I'm not making this shot, that this outcome isn't what we want, because at least we can predict the behavior. And if I can be counted on to be the one that I'm going to do the thing that needs to be done, even when it's hard, even when it's hard emotionally, then that is better than me hesitating because I'm scared of the outcome, because it's not really about the outcome anyway.
Right. No, 100%. And I think one of the things that I've seen in your content, and then I also have coached with PGC, is NATO not attached to outcome. And
Mm.
what you're talking about of the importance of being like, I love you, no, whether you make the shot or not, or whether we win the game or not, so people can feel safe, right? We play better when we feel safe, when we feel like we belong. Like at the end of the day, that's what we like crave for on teams. So just making sure. Can you talk about what the acronym NATO is, and how you use it?
Yeah, NATO's an interesting one. Not attached to outcome is what it stands for, and I think it's best used to when you're giving space to experiment. So we'll use NATO when we're having athletes experiment with range or experiment with a new set of footwork or whatever it is that, like, literally let go of the miss or the make. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried, can you move your body in this way, and just try to just look for rim hits is what we're looking for. Whereas, we also have sometimes where outcomes do matter, when you're charting your results, right? Because you need to measure things in order to know that you're getting better at them. I think it's an ebb and flow. Outcomes of games do matter. Wins and losses matter. But again, coming back to, like, we don't equate your worth to your wins. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck to lose. It does. But we always, like, can say we're going as hard as we can after this goal. Right? In these drills, we're not attached to outcome. We're feeling something different. In this situation, we are. We're trying to put in as many shots as we can. In that case, the outcomes do matter. But overall, like, your worthiness is not equal to whether this ball goes in or not. It doesn't mean it doesn't suck when you miss. And so constantly, like, fighting that fight with yourself and with and for them has been, yeah, my philosophy of teaching. And I don't think it's something that you ever just, like, suddenly have. It's something we have to fight for all through adulthood. There's never a moment where suddenly it's like, oh, okay, I don't really care that I miss. Like, I do shooting workouts and I punt basketball still because it sucks to miss shots. But I never, I'm never a worse or a lesser human or player because I didn't have a good shooting day. I can acknowledge that emotionally I'm reacting to this, and I can also acknowledge that I'm still a bucket, because I've done the work. And so that's the audacity piece, is like, when you don't have the evidence, can you still believe this thing about yourself?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and kind of shake or nodding because I have the same thing when I'm shooting by myself, right? If I don't hit, X out of 10 or whichever I'm doing, right, I'm like disappointed in myself. So that never goes away, but still like recognizing that, obviously I still value myself as a human, and I like 3 out of 10, like I'm still worth it, or
Right.
kind of having that shifting mindset. And you're talking about that, the importance of your philosophy of teaching. And I want to kind of shift to 532 days on the road. I mean, it's just so far, right? Like, you've taken your philosophy of teaching on the road, and I'm going to do my best, because one of the things that I'm challenged with sometimes when I podcast is I ask a huge question that has like 3 or 5 questions in it. So I'm going to boil it down to, when going on the road and going on your, this journey last, you're almost at two, I guess you're probably what, a year and a half. I'm trying to do some math there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think a
like
year and yeah, a year and a half ish.
year and a half on the road. Like, how has your teaching evolved in that year and a half?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's become more and more clear to me that it's not about me. Like, I think even being able to stay on the road like this is because I leveled with myself on that. Is when when you start teaching, when you start doing anything, like, it is about you. It has to be about you, because you have to study yourself and your craft and how you're presenting and all of that. Like, that's very natural. And then at some point, once you reach I think a certain level of comfort with the material, or with, I mean, who you are, where you are, all of that. Um, yeah, I've evolved in that. I've studied and practiced and gotten my reps, like in teaching and in leading and all of those things. And now that I've gotten to a place of comfort with all of that, I've very intentionally shifted into, yeah, it ain't about me. It's about them. And there's, you mentioned safety earlier, like psychological safety, meeting them where they are. Um, it's not about, the content. It's not about the, reputation. It's like, yeah, it just ain't about me. Is I think how my teaching has evolved as I've gotten better at this craft. It's easy to slip into like me. Like, look at all these kids that I taught. Like, look at all these success stories from me, which I think is, they're important to know from a marketing perspective, and to like combat, imposter syndrome, which we all still have. I still, have shooting workouts where I'm halfway through and I'm like, God, like, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this at all before you get to your breakthrough. But yeah, it's evolved into a very much a place of service, that I think foundationally, that's why we all start coaching anyway.
Absolutely. So that, talking about that place of service, and being able to probably serve, I don't know however many athletes, but a lot of athletes, right? On the road. Like, what would you say the commonalities are between all of the athletes you have worked with, and what have been some differences, with whether it be age and stage, or whatever that may be?
Yeah, commonalities. Do you mean like in shooting, like mechanically, or do you mean um, like mindset, or both, or yeah?
Let's go both. Let's go with both.
Okay. Mechanically, age and stage obviously matters, but my non-elite shooters, I should say, that are, or really any shooter that's, even if they are elite, any shooter that's 15 years old or younger. The three major things that I see are lifting lifting to the chest and then pushing from there, instead of lifting like through the face and extending from there. I think that's a release point situation. Is we talk about a lot about the outcome or the end part of it, and we don't talk about how we redistribute our energy through that movement that then gets us to the end product. So that's one thing. In girls specifically, it's bringing the ball into your chest, rather than allowing the ball to redirect down and low, as if you would, if you didn't have a basketball, you would swing your arms back and jump up from there. the same thing with a basketball. You allow your body to load before you then unload. In my boys, it's they tend to swing the ball out in front of them, and that is usually a contributing factor from a wrist inflexibility. Our boys tend to have really inflexible wrists because they lift heavier weights or they do pull-ups or whatever it is, and so then it's hard for them to get underneath the ball early. So they tend to swing the ball out in order to get underneath it. Those are some mechanical things. Third thing would be, follow through, not going at your target. It's so simple, but it's something that feels a little bit different for everybody. So those things, and then also feeling, oh my gosh, elbow in has just like that teaching cue has vastly disturbed the feeling of shooting, the ability to move through in a comfortable way. This is not to say we'd go elbow out by any means, but like we don't teach chicken wings, but allowing the body to tilt, not away from the basket, to tilt so our shooting side is towards our basket, and then lifting with comfort, where we still lift in a straight line, our elbows move in a straight line, they come up together, they don't come up outside, is really important. But when we teach elbow in over and over and over again, that causes such an abnormal movement biomechanically in our bodies that then our bodies want to compensate, and then we lean to the right. That elbow in teaching point is one that I don't give. We correct any chicken wing situations, but I think those things have been the biggest problems to help correct. Overall, the shooting smooth, the follow through, and then the trying to get a good feeling of shooting, an athletic feeling of shooting. Mindset. Yeah, everybody's so afraid to miss. Everybody's so afraid to miss. Consistency, right, is the when I ask players where do they want to get better at shooting, and they say I want to be more consistent, and it's like everybody wants to be more consistent. Like that's such a hard thing to say, oh yeah, I can make you more consistent, because it's really law of averages. Can you continue to shoot confidently, catch and shoot, and understand this is the right decision that I'm making, despite the evidence in front of you? So that might speak to otherwise. So mindset wise, it's how do you teach them to still believe through the slumps and to keep shooting through the slumps, or make something else happen for themselves? Go get a layup, go get a foul drawn, go shoot a couple free throws and see those go through. How do you keep working through that? And the hesitation thing, especially for our non-elite athletes, or non-elite shooters, the ones that are working their way up to becoming elite shooters. Those are the common problems in mindset, is just continuing to shoot even though they might not be there yet.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it's really interesting how you kind of bring up certain points around, talking about getting that wrist loaded. So when we're talking about loading the wrist for boys specifically, how do we make sure that they're getting their ball and hand under it without causing too much pain?
Yeah, so a lot of the time they'll have their hand on the ball with a flat wrist, right? And so therefore the hand gets on top of the ball, and then they have to bring it up and somehow get under at the top of the ball. And again, there's no absolutes in shooting. This is just from, what we study is how do we simplify this movement so our bodies are more likely to repeat it over and over again. And we found that if you teach them to load their wrist early on the ball, so not get behind the basketball, but to have your hand on the ball. The way I explain it is I have them pretend like they're holding a cup of coffee down by their hip. And so I have them look down at their wrist. You should see wrinkles on the inside of your wrist, not just the inside of your thumb, not your whole wrist, but that kind of middle, like from the middle of your wrist to the joint that's even with your thumb. You should see wrinkles in that section of your wrist. Cool. Do you see that? Great. Now add the basketball to it. That's what it feels like to load your wrist. Your thumb is even with your belly button normally, or somewhere around there. And so then when you come up, now you're underneath the basketball. And it's so crazy. That's what I teach at the very beginning of a lot of my sessions. And inevitably there's always like one or two kids that are right in the front and their eyes just get like super wide, like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been missing this whole time. So yeah, that's what I mean by like teaching that wrist flexibility is if we load early, then we don't have to worry about loading somewhere else in the shot. Then it just simplifies. Now I'm already loaded. All I have to do is come up and unload.
Are there certain like wrist exercises or stretches that boys should be doing? Because I know sometimes my boys have pain when they shoot with their wrist locked.
Yeah, I think you can be intentional about activating and stretching your wrist if you know your wrists are unflexible. A lot of my boys have played baseball or something, so that tends to contribute to some inflexibility. And then you just, if you know that's true about yourself, then I mean, it's just moving your wrists around, activating them, stretching them, flexion and extension, wrist circles, those sorts of things are what we do for those athletes. And again, it won't be the same for every athlete, but research would show the earlier we load, the more simple our shot can be. Our shot line can not cover as much space, which in theory would tell us that when we have defense in front of us, when we have to make a read, the simpler thing that our body remembers, the better, because that movement won't have so much variability inside of it.
Gotcha. That makes a ton of sense. So, speaking of women's basketball and teaching girls how to shoot, I'd love for you to tell the audience what you got going on regarding the women's Final Four next year.
Yeah, yeah, the women's Final Four in Cleveland. Um, yeah, we're about 9 weeks ago. I just had 20 seconds of insane courage that I think had really been building up from my own experiences at conferences as being the token woman to speak at them. And, you know, over this past summer, one of the conferences I was asked to speak at, where they were great people, right? Very well meaning. And I made the mistake of thinking that they wanted me to talk about shooting at a player development conference when they wanted me to talk about what it's like to be a woman in the space. And that's what it's like. It is being asked to speak at a player development conference about, women's empowerment. And like really nobody at a basketball conference wants to talk about women's empowerment. Like not even women. Like we want to talk about hoops. We want to talk about our craft. And so that's the message I gave is like, if you guys want to empower my voice, then ask me about basketball. And that's how we go about changing the game. And so from that birthed an idea that in 20 seconds of insane courage, I decided to pull the trigger on. And we're running the first ever completely female-led coaching conference at the Women's Final Four this year. Nancy Lieberman is our headliner. We have coaches from all over the spectrum that are serving basketball, from biomechanics technology to sports psychology to culture to applied movement specialists to mental performance training, shooting, skill development, running your camps for your programs and how you could do better at that. We're really hitting basketball from angles that I think people don't realize people are serving basketball in this way. And we're building it. It's my first time running anything like this, so I'm learning as I go, and it just feels much bigger than me. And it's crazy that it hasn't been done before. And yeah, that's what's happening at the Final Four.
That sounds like such a great experience. And can you talk about the importance of this event when it comes to growing the women's game?
Yeah, I think it's about giving a platform to these women who are the best coaches I know of basketball. They really are some of the best coaches of basketball that I know, and they all just happen to be women. And so it's providing a platform for them, but even beyond them, the coaches of the next generation are the little girls that are in a gym right now building. right, that maybe are like me. They end up being 5'6" and they can't move sideways. And so coaching is their way to stay in basketball, and this thing that's taught us so much. And for them to see like, oh, okay, like there is a platform, like there is a place where all of these incredible basketball minds that just so happen to be women can come together and showcase, like, this is what it looks like. Look at all of these incredible women who are doing this, and you can too. So it's about the speakers that are and showcasing them and boosting them. I mean, we've got speakers that were handpicked by Kobe to run, the WNBA preseason program he was putting together before, 6 weeks before he passed. We've got people who, NBA movement specialists have asked to run their business and like send their NBA guys. We've got, sports psychologists who have worked on NBA teams. We've, obviously we have biomechanics experts who have worked with NBA, NHL, PGA Tour golfers. Like we have all of these people who've worked both in men's and women's sports, and they're just all badasses, really. And like, selfishly, I brought them all together so I could sit there and connect with them and learn from them. And like, my mom is cooking us all dinner on like night 0 whenever they all come in. We're all getting an Airbnb and like doing it like retreat style, so we can all just connect on this thing that brought us all together in the first place. So I hope that answers your question. But I'm I like, again, it just feels big. It feels bigger than me, and it feels like nobody yet has taken the risk on putting something like this together. And so that's what I'm going to do.
I love it. And I really admire how everything's kind of come full circle, like you talked about with your teaching philosophy at the beginning, and how this journey has kind of helped you understand that it's not about you, it's about bringing together different people. And as we talk about you being on the road for over 500 days, and I'm just so curious, because I love connecting with people. It's like one of the reasons I love having a podcast, so I get to learn and listen from people who are way smarter than me, kind of like what you were talking about, and you're meeting people from all different walks of life and having these different connections. What has that experience really been like?
Yeah, I think inevitably, when you find the thing that you're supposed to do, I think it takes time and testing and trying new things. I thought I wanted to be a college coach. That didn't work. I thought I wanted to do overall player development. That didn't work. I thought I wanted to just be a shooting coach, and in a way I'm still doing that, but it wasn't quite it, right? So it's just this constant journey of finding and trying new things. And I love that you used the phrase like these walks of life, because I think you get to a place where the path leads you, and when you're purpose driven, any cool thing that happens just happens as a byproduct of letting your purpose put 2 feet and put one foot in front of the other. And so goals or whatever, I think, are important to set, but again, just happen as a byproduct of the work and of enjoying exactly where your feet are.
That's amazing. And so as we wrap up this podcast conversation, what would your final piece of advice be for the parents and coaches that are listening to this episode?
Always remember to remind your athletes how much fun you're having just watching them play.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.